We'll start. So once again, thank you so much for your patience and sorry for some of these technical delays, but we're ready to start. So I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Fair Labor Association and Article 1 to this panel titled Leading by Example, Effective Grievance Mechanisms Centering Rights Holders in Asia. So I want to talk a little bit about what we would like to do today. So we are going to have a panel discussion, and you will hear from different perspectives, really discussing this issue around grievance mechanisms. But then we're going to have all of you discuss in small groups and play, sort of do some role playing and to think about certain issues that have come up during this session. And then finally, at the end, you will have a chance, maybe a few minutes or something that you can take home to think individually about how you could make some adjustments, some changes, how you can incorporate some of these ideas into your own work. So grievance mechanisms is something that, it's very critical. It's talked about a lot. It's certainly it's been a part of the UN guiding principles. It's actually part of the mandatory human rights due diligence regulations. And so we know that it's really important when we're thinking about providing remedy. But it's not only about remedy, it's also about prevention. So an effective grievance mechanism allows us to prevent abuses and violations before they occur or before they escalate. And we know that, I mean, there's a lot of evidence to show that it really creates, when workers feel that they are being listened to, it creates better work environments. There's more job satisfaction. Workers have a voice. I mean, all of these things we know are really important outcomes of effective grievance mechanisms. Unfortunately, what we also know is that despite the attention to this, and despite the fact that, I mean, there are quite a lot of mechanisms in place kind of throughout the world in different contexts and different settings, oftentimes what we see is that there is a disconnect between sort of the lived experiences and what the kind of interventions we are trying to put in place. So workers, for example, are rarely consulted in the design of many of these mechanisms, which also explains why oftentimes there's very little uptake. Oftentimes workers don't necessarily, even though it's available to them, they don't necessarily use it. There's oftentimes they're in one particular factory, there may be too many options. It may be confusing. They may not be effective. There's often not a feedback loop. Workers don't actually, even though they can voice their grievance, but then they never hear anything afterwards. There's no follow up. There's no feedback loop. And after a while, it's sort of like, well, what's the point? And then, of course, there's some serious issues that come out, like, fear of retaliation often is something that really prevents workers from actually using the grievance mechanisms that are in place. So in this panel, what we're going to discuss is how can we rethink what we mean by effective? When we're talking about effective, I mean, what does that even mean? How can we think about it? And we're going to use examples that really come from the Asian context, which really center rights holders and their own experiences. So I'm really pleased to introduce my panelists today. We have Rakesh Narayan. He's the director of worker-centered business and human rights at People's Courage International. We have Sif Thorgensen. She's the senior vice president of investigations and engagement at the Fair Labor Association. And then by joining us virtually, we have Veronique Rocher. She's senior director of sustainability at Puma. So I'm going to start by asking some of the panelists a few questions. We have some shorter presentations. If we have time, we'll have a little bit of discussion, and then we will do the exercise where we break you all up into groups. So I'll just start with you, Sif. So tell us a little bit about the FLA's grievance process and what, in your opinion, has made it successful.
Great. Thanks, Sanchita, and thanks everybody for being patient with us today. So what I thought I would do is start off by talking about what FLA does on grievance mechanisms, might give us a bit of a framework for how to discuss this as we break up into the groups for the workshop. But primarily, FLA's work on grievance mechanisms boils down to a couple of different things. One is what we look at the operational and brand level. So we have grievance mechanism requirements for the companies that join FLA. And then FLA itself has its own complaint mechanism that is available to basically anyone to file a complaint with the FLA regarding FLA members. So first, I'd like to talk about what FLA members do and they commit to when they join the FLA. And for those who are not familiar with the Fair Labor Association, we are a multi-stakeholder initiative made up of 3 stakeholder groups, businesses, colleges and universities, and civil society organizations. And we join together to work to improve workers' lives in global supply chains. So part of what we do when a company joins the FLA, they make a commitment to our 10 principles of fair labor and responsible sourcing. This includes really everything that would be needed at the brand level to allow them to create a strong monitoring system to monitor the labor rights in their global supply chains. So I know this is rather small, but I just wanted to note that this is really sort of a human rights due diligence structured number of principles, and one of our key principles is to have functioning grievance mechanisms, our principle 6. There we go. So principle 6 is focused on 2 different aspects of grievance mechanisms. One is the brands who join, they need to ensure that the factories or facilities where they source have effective grievance mechanisms in place. So there, they need to make sure that these are effective using the UN Guiding Principle 8 effectiveness criteria, ensure that there's no penalty for using them, and that there's at least one confidential reporting channel. The second piece is that the brand themselves need to provide a secondary source, an alternative channel for filing a grievance in the event that the operational level ones are just not functioning or that it's just not the appropriate route for the grievance that they want to file. And in all of these cases, we need to make sure that there's training done, an annual, done on an annual basis so that it is clear to all workers, supervisors, and managers that this is a key aspect of their work. Fortuitously, sorry, I'm just getting ahead of myself. The other piece of FLA structure with its members is that our members need to put in place a code of conduct and compliance benchmarks that are aligned with the FLAs. So I just wanted to give a snapshot of the piece of our compliance benchmarks that deal with grievance systems. So this is the other part of just helping the suppliers understand what a grievance system should look like when it's broken down into its components. And then next, in terms of resources, and I thought this might be useful for those of you in the room, we did just last month put out a toolkit on grievance mechanisms. We're really focused as an organization on providing pragmatic guidance for our members on how to create and operate your grievance mechanisms, and tools also for our members' suppliers to be able to implement strong and effective grievance mechanisms. So I put the web address then that's freely available on our website. Then next, so I look at our grievance mechanisms at the FLA almost like in 3 tiers. So we have the operational level, we have the brand level, and then we have fair labor investigations. And fair labor investigations breaks down into effectively 3 things. We have third-party complaints, brand commission investigations, and an FLA independent investigation. They all follow a similar pattern. The difference is what instigates the investigation. So a third-party complaint, anybody can file a complaint with the FLA. I'll actually go to the next slide because it's maybe more instructive. So basically, we have instructions in all these languages. Oops, look forward to adding as many languages as possible, but these will allow anyone to file a complaint with us alleging that there's persistent, significant, serious non-compliances with FLA's code of conduct at a facility supplying an FLA company. And so once we receive the complaint, we start our third-party complaint process. So I just note that the brand commission and FLA initiated investigations. The difference there is either our member brand will initiate an investigation or FLA itself, which it rarely does, but also we're able to initiate an investigation should we feel the need to do so. So here, just to give you guys a snapshot of the process, we get the complaint. If it's in scope, then we move on to letting our member company know about the complaint. There, we provide a 30-day window for resolution. So quite often, and I will say probably 70% of our complaints are actually resolved in this 30-day window. Most of our companies are actually quite keen to resolve a problem once it's flagged for them. If no such resolution is possible, we move forward with an independent investigation. And then the case is listed on our complaint tracker on our website. Then we retain an independent investigator to conduct the investigation. Once the investigation has started, our member company has to ensure that there's full access to the supplier to be able to investigate. The investigator conducts the work in accordance to our standards, and then the report is published on our website. So I think one of the strengths of this process is the transparency element. So the investigative report is published on our website. Once the report is done, depending on what the findings are, the FLA and our member company, we develop a remediation plan. That remediation plan also goes on our website, and we track the implementation of the remediation until it's completed, and then we close the case. So I'm sorry, I'm rushing through this because I know we lost some time at the beginning, but that in effect sort of is FLA's complaint process. And I would say sort of our key mantra, going back to what Sanchita started with, is the way I look at grievance mechanisms, and I think one of the most important things we can think about it when it comes to grievance mechanisms, it has to be something that a worker knows about. Most importantly, a worker trusts that they are able to use it and they're able to get a response from it. So those are to me, the four key elements. And if you meet those elements, then I think we can say the grievance mechanism is hopefully effective.
Thank you, Sif. So I'm going to turn it over to Veronique. And
we can take them. Yep.
Everybody, you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. So Veronique, welcome. So I wanted to ask you, so as I said, you are with Puma. So as a company, what is your biggest challenge when you're trying to ensure that an effective grievance mechanism is in place? And then what has stood out to you about FLA's investigation process? So we kind of learned it a little bit from SIF. How does that interact with Puma's own mechanism?
Okay, thank you. Just to give you a very quick snapshot about how we are working. So Puma is a FLA accredited company since 2007, and we went through what Sif explained, all those different principles and reviewed from FLA for us to improve step by step. I think the key point is about thinking about constant improvement, right? So we are offering multiple channel for workers, factory workers, or civil society organization to reach out Puma in case they are not satisfied with what's happening in the factory. So we are using also existing tool like Micro Benefit or Labor Solution Tool, which is an app that the workers can install in their phone. And when they raise a concern, this grievance will actually go first to the factory management. And if the factory management do not respond within a certain time, then this will escalate to Puma. So I would say the first criteria for us as an effective grievance efficiency is that actually the workers trust the factory grievance mechanism first as a first contact point, and this would only be at the second step escalated to the brand for them to work with the factory and the complainant. What we have as a problem, as a challenge that you mentioned, is about the scalability of the grievance that we need to have in place. So we have production in multiple countries. We also have to have multiple languages that we need. So there's also sometimes foreign migrant workers. So we also need to have. So we are actually shifting now from this multiple channel to actually also a more automated channel, which is actually used by our Puma own employees. So we are using the same system Now we're going to launch it for the factory workers as well. So this will help to actually really have the language that the workers are speaking the most, that we can answer instead of having our local team answering in the local language of this country. So this is going to ensure a higher accessibility and scalability of our system. Workers' trust is also important, how we can create it. So by those apps that I have mentioned to you, so using two different companies depending on the countries, there is a possibility for Puma to actually conduct a worker survey. So of course, we're putting the questionnaire, having in a local language, and this is a way for us to get input from workers who are actually contacting us directly or not, to tell us how they feel comfortable with our hotline. Have we responded to their up to their expectation and so on. So this is also a way for us to keep that connection directly to the workers. I think one of the biggest challenge is about analyzing those data, all the grievances that we have. So which is also why we wanted to shift to one platform where this data analysis will be greater for us to understand the likelihood of those issues to happen at other factories, even though those grievances were not raised. Or it can be systematic issues that maybe we can address at the larger scale. So these required resource from our team, but this also requires more technology for us to be able to do those analyses. So we are reporting the number of grievances we receive every year, the percentage of grievances that were solved. We also reporting the most frequent grievances that we receive to see how we are making progress year after year. So this is a way for us to measure the effectiveness of our grievance. And then to answer your last question, so yes, we do have also a third-party complaint. So I think what we really like is the independent approach of FLA, engaging with a trustable party to do this investigation after receiving a complaint, which is also not necessarily a brand decision, but it's also more either the organization or the complainant decision to also accept this third party company that will conduct the investigation. And where we gain credibility is also that those reports are published in FLA website, either with allegations that are confirmed, but also the actions that has been taken. So yeah, what I wanted to say here is that the credibility that we gain as a brand because of the transparency and because of the independent organization and trustable organization that will do the investigation. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Veronique. Thanks so much. And then Rakesh, I'm going to turn it over to you and to ask you from a CSO perspective, why you think grievance mechanisms are so essential, and then what elements from your perspective really make it effective.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. So I work at People's Courage International, where we run an independent grievance resolution mechanism called Mazdoor Helpline. So this helpline is open to workers from all sectors and from all geographies in India where we work. So the two pillars of this program, the first is the 24/7 toll-free helpline, which has six language capabilities. We also have a strong field presence through our field offices. We are present in about 95 districts in India, of a total of around 800 districts. So through these two channels, we are able to register about 1,500 cases every month. And the thing about independent grievance redressal mechanisms is that there's no mandate for the employers or the labor contractors to engage with us to join the mediation process, because there's no brand or any other people pressurizing them to join us. But in spite of this, I would like to mention that we're able to kind of resolve about 40% of cases in favor of workers every month. So we kind of get about around 120,000 US dollars in unpaid wages and compensation on a monthly basis. And to put this number into perspective, the daily average wage is between $5 to $10. And other than this, on average, we kind of rescue close to 150 to 200 workers from forced labor situations every month. So based on these experiences that we have had with running independent GRMs, I want to talk about why GRMs are essential and also what can make them more effective. Like while discussing why GRMs are so important, I think it's important to kind of look at the context and conditions that most workers find themselves in global South, primarily speaking. The first thing I want to mention is that a very low level of unionization. We don't have enough statistics around this issue, but a very dismal proportion of workers are unionized in the global South, especially in the global supply chains. The second thing that I want to mention is that we need to stop thinking of workers as formal and informal. At least from an Indian perspective, I can say that formality and informality is a continuum. To give an example, in the apparel sector, it could look on paper that a worker is formal because she gets minimum wage, she has a written contract, she has some sort of social security benefits. But if you look deep into her working condition, the hours that she works with, the kind of harassment that she might face on the factory floor, and other conditions, the working condition could be worse than an informal sector. So we need to kind of stop looking at formal and informal as two separate things and look at them as a continuum. And then the state-led institutions, whether it's the labor department or labor justice mechanisms, they're either they're overburdened or they're inefficient, or in some cases they favor the capital. So the kind of support that workers can receive from state mechanism is quite less. And like I said already, workers are not unionized. And because of this, workers tend to be the most powerless and voiceless stakeholder in the entire ecosystem. And this is where a grievance redressal mechanism can come, and an efficient GRM could kind of slightly tilt the power balance of power in favor of workers. Before going on to speak a little bit about what will make GRM efficient, how can we ensure that they're successful, I just want to first acknowledge that GRMs, they do not act in silos. We all know that the purchasing practices, the contractual measures, the exit policies, the labor laws in the country, they all have an impact on what kind of level of rights that workers can expect, and therefore what a GRM can achieve. But the first thing I would like to mention in terms of a GRM is having clear standards and letting the workers know of those standards. And that's much more complicated than, it's not as straightforward as it sounds. To give you an example, we have something called the Employee Compensation Act in case workers lose their lives or they face accident at workplace. And tens of thousands of workers unfortunately lose their lives and limbs. But in spite of this, a majority of workers do not know that there are compensatory monetary compensation that they're entitled to. Many of them are just happy if the employer pays for the medical expenses. So making sure that the workers know what they're entitled to under all the guiding principles and contracts beyond their monthly pay is a very critical part of GRMs. The second thing, and this is very important, is to build the workers' confidence. We have kind of registered tens of thousands of cases, but very rarely do workers complain against their existing employer. Because the only thing worse than being exploited by your employer is not being exploited, that's being unemployed. So kind of to break this fear of backlash is a very big ask, and that's where we need to work at. And one way that we could do is, how can we include CSOs and unions in this mechanism? A worker may not feel very comfortable to kind of go and report to a factory mechanism, but if she feels that there's somebody from a CSO or a union backing her and kind of giving her the moral support, maybe the kind of registration of cases will improve. The fourth thing I want to say is accessibility. When we started the program, we assumed that we'll get most of the cases through a helpline, but actually more than 70% of our cases are registered through our field workers on the ground. A complaint box or a helpline is not something that the workers feel that they can trust, and especially and not worry about the backlash. So it's the people on the ground that they meet day in and day out. So who are those people who are handholding them through this process? That's very important. So that's where the role of unions and COSOs will come into it. And this is where accessibility is not just the physical infrastructure, but is these people who kind of support them through the process. And this is very obvious, but timely resolution of cases is important. What we see is that when we go to a new geography, initially the workers are very reluctant to raise complaints, but we kind of, if we solve one or two cases from a slum or a factory or a labor point, then they start a flood of cases coming because they've seen the impact. So that's it's very obvious, but it's a very important thing because nothing succeeds like success. So having a good resolution, fair resolution, timely resolution, and then letting the workers know is important. The last thing I want to mention is transparency and confidentiality. So transparent in terms of the cases registered, the actions taken, the time taken, etc. But at the same time, maintaining confidentiality in terms of workers' protection where relevant. So we can kind of go on and on about confidentiality, confidence building measures, etc. But I want to leave with 2 points in terms of how do you judge a GRM. So in your ecosystem, look at the most vulnerable worker. To give you an example, let's say a factory in Tamil Nadu, a garment factory in Tamil Nadu in South India. One significant group there is teenage girls between 16 to 24 years from indigenous communities, forest dwelling communities who have traveled thousands of kilometers, do not speak the local language. They live in the hostels provided by the factories, and their movement is controlled. Can this girl raise a complaint using your GRM? I think that's the standard we should all achieve for in terms of the most vulnerable workers, because workers have multiple identities of gender, ethnicity, geography, and so on. That's something to look for. And while we were planning for this session, Sif was talking about the wish list of CSOs. So in that spirit, I would like to end with an aspirational note. uh, like, can we aim, can we imagine a situation where we say that the GRMs that we have in the factory floor, they're as efficient as the GRMs we have in our corporate offices? I understand that the world we live in, the salaries paid to a factory worker is not equal to the employees or people like us who work in the corporate offices. Okay, I can understand that, but can anybody really make a case saying that a woman work on the factory should not have the same level of protection as our women colleagues against sexual violence or harassment at workplace? So that's the aspiration I think we should all look for, saying that can we have the same level of GRMs, the same quality as we have in our corporate offices? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rakesh. That's great. And actually, so what I'm going to talk about very briefly is, and it follows very nicely with the last three presentations from my panelists. And I'm just going to talk very quickly, actually, because we are, running out of time as I speak. But give another example, and perfectly, actually, what Rakesh just ended with. This is kind of, just sort of the next step in thinking about another positive example of a grievance mechanism or a few different types of grievance mechanisms in the context of gender-based violence and harassment and these are cases in apparel factories. So, of course, we're talking about grievance mechanisms and then the difficulty for workers to raise them. There's so many constraints. And we'll just, make it even harder if we're thinking about it in the context of gender-based violence and harassment. I think we don't need to imagine very much to say that how difficult it would be for typically a woman to, in any context, really be comfortable to report something so difficult. So there are three examples of enforceable brand agreements that have been put in place starting from 2019, the Lesotho Agreement to End Gender-Based Violence and Harassment in 2022, the Dindigul Agreement, and then the latest one is in 2025, we just established this year in Central Java in Indonesia. So if you're interested in those and you don't know about it, I'd encourage you to read about them. They're quite, very interesting stories on how they even came to be. Just for lack of time, I won't go into those details. But some of the things I do want to mention is that the grievance mechanism aspect in these EBAs, they actually try to address some of the flaws that we've all discussed from the design itself. So these are just some of the commonalities, and not everyone necessarily follows all of them, but this is kind of, you can say it's a kind of across the board. So one is that there are several channels to report grievances that are independent from management. So I think, as Rakesh said and others, I mean, that's really something, critical. It can't be that you're reporting and then constantly worried that your management is going to retaliate against you in some way. There is extensive training of management and workers in what is called the train the trainer model. And that is proven again and again in these contexts to be very, very effective. There is, I think all three of the panelists mentioned trust. There is a real emphasis in these mechanisms on trust. And it's building that trust with those who are monitoring, the shop floor monitors who are on the factory floor, building their trust and kind of developing this approach where many times, the workers, they just see these shop floor monitors. Maybe they don't have a grievance, but they see them around. You can imagine that when they actually do have something to report, that relationship and that trust has already been developed. You need to develop it beforehand. It's not when there's an extreme crisis. At that point, it's much harder to be able to know who you can go to. But if you've developed it over time, it's going to make it a little bit easier. Again, as what Rakesh was saying, the strong role of a union or a female-led organization in these cases, again, very, very critical, especially when we're dealing with GBVH in the context of factory work, where primarily those employed are young women. And then finally, again, what both Veronique and Sif talked about was the fact that you're actually seeing remedy and you're seeing consequences of actions. That's one of the complaints that workers make all the time. We don't see, yes, we report our grievances, but we absolutely don't see any resolution. Or, what difference does it make if I say anything? But in these cases, there's been, good data collected that the workers actually feel that they're seeing some resolution. So I'm just going to, I have a few more slides, but I'm just going to, this is the last one, which again, really highlighting, particularly looking at the Dindigul Agreement, but highlighting the idea of trust here. And I just want to mention, this is a really, sometimes, we think of very sophisticated, very fancy things. Technology is great for so many things, but I think we also have to realize, and I just said this earlier to a bunch of students, technology is an ends to a mean, or sorry, I'm saying it wrong, a means to an end. I myself am getting it confused. A means to an end, but not the end itself. So we have all these great technologies out there, and we're getting more and more, cooler technologies. A lot of times those work, but this is an example of something that is very low tech, but extremely effective. It's called under the tree model. Basically, it's, a lot of the women who are trained to be, they serve as sort of the first step in if someone has a grievance, particularly about, this is focused on GBVH. So you can imagine the kind of trust you need to develop. They actually just come and sit under the tree, literally. This is a picture of that area near the factory. Sometimes people come and just meet them for a cup of coffee and a cup of tea and chat. But you can imagine if someone at some point is getting harassed by their supervisor, they are more likely to feel comfortable to come under that tree and maybe talk to one or two of the shop floor monitors who they've seen on a regular basis. So this is a concept that is quite simple, but I think all of us can relate to the fact that, if you trust someone or if you've built that trust, it's going to be much easier to go to them with something so serious and personal. So I'm going to end there actually because we are short on time. But I wanted to now actually go to the next part of the program, or the session, which is really to break you up into 3 groups. And so I'm just going to do this in kind of a, sort of I'm not going to count everyone down, but I think we'll just do it in a way where, so right here, we're split it up. So all of you will be the private sector. Remember that. You in the middle, so this middle section, you'll be government or policymakers. And then everyone to the left here, all of you will be civil society organization. Okay, so remember what your role is. This is role play. So if you're likely you are not, the role I assigned in real life, but that, this is role play. But within these larger groups, I want you to break up into a group of 5. So, actually it's a great way to meet new people. So go and introduce yourself, meet someone, get in a group of 5. But remember what role you're playing. So same here, get in a group of 5, and here, get in a group of 5. And then we're gonna put up some questions, and we're gonna give you about 20 minutes. And I want you to discuss. So these are the questions here. Okay. In your group of 5, from the role that that you've been assigned, I want you to think about these different questions. You don't have to get through all of them. It's fine, but just, as many as you can. We'll spend about 20 minutes on this, and then I want you to select one or two people from your group of 5 who will be willing to sort of share with the larger group what you discussed. And you can just pick one of the questions that you want to talk about. We may not get to everyone, but do have one person at least that you volunteer or they volunteer to be the one to share out with the rest of the group. So we're going to do that in the final section of the workshop. So again, and a few of us, my colleagues from the FLA and myself, will be kind of walking around. And if you have any questions about the questions or any, anything you want to ask, we'll be kind of walking around. So let's spend about 20 minutes on this. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to remind you that keep in mind the role that you're playing. So answer these questions with that role. So don't go to what your actual, what you do on your day job. Remember the role that you're playing. So we want to make sure that you're thinking in that on those lines. Okay, everyone, you have 5 more minutes to wrap up your discussion. It's okay if you didn't get through all of the questions, that's totally fine. But remember to select 1 or 2 people from your group who will present to the larger session. Okay, everyone. So we're going to come back as a larger group and share some of what we discussed in our smaller groups. I want to just say for those of you who are participating online, you've asked some great questions. We will get back to you shortly, so please be patient. And those of you who are online, you were wondering why the last 20 minutes you couldn't hear anyone. So everyone was talking in their groups, but now everyone will be back on mic, so you'll be able to hear. Um, okay, so we can start. Does anyone want to volunteer? Otherwise, I'm happy to call on you. But if anyone would like to volunteer, any group would like to go first. So should we start with the privates? Okay, we have a group. So you're government policy makers, right? Just just remind everyone who you were playing and which question. Just say which question you'd like to answer.
Yes, so we take the role as a government and we think about two things. First thing, we think about how to build a structure or how to give the guidance about the structure. For example, we would like to provide guidance so that all the company, they know, all the workers, they know that they will have a multiple option for grievance. So they can talk to the brand, they can talk to the company, or they can talk to the government. So all of them know about the multiple option. Secondly, we also provide some guidance for the company to build their own grievance mechanism to make sure that it provides safety and confidential for the people who report. So this is something we are thinking. And one thing we are, and one thing we are frustrated, or I really frustrated, is about we talk about the brand, we talk about FLA, make a lot of things, but in fact, in many factories, the worker they do not report. We have a QR code, we have a subscription box, we have a helpline, but workers they when I went to many factories, no report. And I asked the worker why you don't report, and they said if I report, I think I will quit the job so that I will report. And so the problem I really frustrated is about, it's not about we don't have grievance channel, but how to make it effectively, especially in the factory, in the ground rule. I think for everybody, for the brand, the grievance mechanism work very well, but how to make it work well in the factory level. So that is something we are frustrated. As a government, we don't know how exactly what to do.
Yeah, very great points. Thank you for that. How about someone from the private sector group? Any volunteers? Yeah, great. So if you can just get to a mic, please.
Okay. So from a private sector perspective, I would say, of course, what should be a dream grievances mechanism to have an effective one, right? So what does effective means? Effective means to be transparent. If I am a labor or a staff, I should be confident enough to share what I am going through a proper channel, right? But like he explained, we do have scan, we do have verbal, and we do receive emails, but they are so not confident to share their problems. We are also facing the similar problem, right? Either it's labor or the staff. So, what is the proper mechanism? We also don't know what would be the best mechanism, but I can definitely say from my experience that when we give them platform to share something, they want. But when I have reached to each individual, then they will have a long list of grievances. So I can share one example. When we had a grievances mechanism in one of our company, they didn't share anything with us. But when we did a gender risk assessment, and it was on anonymous, and they can share anything they want, right? So that was the platform they needed. Then we came to know that some bullying was going on around. Then we had to prepare a mitigation plan and action after that. So I would say individual connection is really key to have a strong grievances mechanism, and to have that capacity in the company is also one of the key to maybe have a successful and effective grievances mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I actually wanted to ask you, or anyone who is playing the role of the brand, what is something as a brand you could do maybe differently? And again, you're playing, you're role playing, so you're just, it's hypothetical to some extent. But what could you do differently to actually make it easier for workers to report? As he said back there, that many workers say that I'd rather just like quit my job before I would have to report something. But as a brand, what could you do to make that better?
Yeah, can I answer? Yes.
Yes, please.
One of the gaps we find in the textile supply chain, with specific reference to textile supply chain, each brands or multi-stakeholder initiative, they have different protocols and procedures for grievance redressal mechanisms. And also the accessibility is very poor in terms of languages. For example, Tamil Nadu. We local people speak Tamil, but interstate migrants from various states, other parts of the country, they are migrating to Tamil Nadu. They speak Marathi, Telugu, Odia, Bengali. And these people, we cannot, assume that they'll speak English, or they can raise their complaint. So what we are proposing is a big dream, like there should be a common grievance facilitation center, redressal center for the particular region or for the sector, which will be governed by the local stakeholders like employers association, trade unions and civil society, who can help these workers to translate or raise their voices and send it to the particular brand. So the brand should come together and have a common procedures so that it will be very easier. Otherwise, even just one job. 5 brands are sourcing from one company, supplier, sourcing from a particular supplier. If there is one grievances, who will address, which procedure should be followed? It's still a question mark. Whether 5 protocols should be followed or so. We propose all the brands should come together. It may be regional. It may be regional specific. There is no one solution or one sub solution. For example, Tamil Nadu textile industry, they can, or textile and leather tanneries, they can have a particular mechanism which is accessible to those areas, which may not be replicated in other parts of the country or other countries, right? So this what we aim. So workers representatives should be there, employers representatives should be there, brands representative, civil societies, government representative. All these people collectively, if they manage the grievance redressal, both state-based and non-state-based, both can be addressed amicably without any fear or retaliation. This is a big dream. Maybe we will see how it will work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if my colleagues from the FLA want to comment on that. I mean, essentially, the FLA and other multi-stakeholder initiatives are, exactly doing that, what you say, and the kind of the importance of that collective action and bringing in the various stakeholders. I don't know if you want to have any comment on that, but if not, we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I apologies. I was trying to answer a question online, so I may have missed the beginning of your what you shared. But I fully recognize that there is a challenge when there are multiple avenues for filing grievances. But one thing that FLA has been doing is working with other organizations that do have grievance mechanisms, where basically we come together and share what we think are best practices, what are challenges we're dealing with. So we are trying to, instead of continue multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, actually trying to come together and sort of standardize what we're doing and make sure that we're aware, each organization is aware of what other organizations are doing, so it doesn't end up becoming duplicative in creating too many mechanisms too. I don't know if that's answering the question or not. But.
Yeah, I mean, FLA and others are really great examples of doing that. And, thank you very much for that. So I want to turn over to the CSOs. Anyone want to volunteer to talk about any of the questions you discussed?
My group.
Shelley has volunteered you, so you're speaking. We'll go to you next. Yeah.
If you use the microphone, then people online can hear. Do you want to sit down?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we didn't come up with very magic solution, but however, we need many trusted worker voice, and local language connection is very important, and finally connecting dots to solution is very key important elements to the CSO. And even CSO can do that because we have labor association and such a many functions, so we can probably reach to that solution.
So when you say connect the dots, do you mean have like a full feedback loop and make sure that the grievances are addressed? Is that what you're meaning by that?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, no, I was just saying when you were saying connect all the dots, do you mean like a full feedback loop, like workers actually know, what has been solved, what is being done?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we discussed was, when a worker is actually sharing a grievance, it should be almost kind of known even beforehand, what the path that the grievance is going to take in terms of the solution, just so that builds the trust, that builds a comfort level to be able to share, and just being able to put those kind of measures in place to say, okay, well, if these are the types of grievances that we have, can we categorize them? Can we actually start to put, connect the dots in terms of what those solutions are, just to be able to build that trust.
Great, thank you so much. And then you had your hand raised, yeah. And if you want to just get in front of a mic, so.
Yeah, I think we have spoke about the third party independent and no retaliation, and also a community influence kind of grievance redressal mechanism, which is also accessible to the workers, and there has to be a neutral and safe space which can be built by the community or can be also assured by the brands and the suppliers together, that can be taken up. In terms of the frustration, I think CSOs are treated as, kind of somebody who should be out of this space, and they're not treated as a ally, both by the workers and the suppliers. So I think that has to be kind of worked out and can be looked into how it can be more constructive. And somebody in the team also didn't like the dashboard because it talks about only marketing part of it. And then there are a lot of misconception about the grievance redressal mechanism, which also should have been kind of looked into by the multi-stakeholders. And moreover, I think it should not be pushed by, most of the time we're looking into that it is kind of pushed by different brands on the suppliers. Rather, it has to be very naturally taken up by the suppliers and by the workers on their own, and then can be looked into a grievance redressal mechanism, which is solution oriented, and where there is a lot of trust and confidence built, both of the suppliers and the brands and the workers and the community as well.
Yeah, very important points. Rakesh, don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you want to react to any of those? Because especially that point about kind of the precarious role of where CSOs are in this whole picture. I think that's a really important point, and I don't know if you wanted to react to that.
I think it's an important point. But if you had to kind of, if you had to take a critical look, then the real representatives of the workers are trade unions. And unfortunately, like I said, there's not enough level of unionization. And that's why I kind of see our role as more of a stopgap arrangement that we are doing right now until the trade unions are strong enough and mobilized enough to play that role. But in the meantime, I agree with Archana that CSOs are playing an important role in terms of bridging the as we saw with Dindigal agreement and other places, trying to kind of bridge the differences between all the different stakeholders, between the workers, the suppliers' interest. To give you one clear example, I think CSOs have done a very good role in terms of advocating for the suppliers with the brands, in terms of brands taking up the cost, also mentioning the what when the businesses shut down, what happens to the suppliers and therefore the workers. So I think there is a role for CSOs to play, but eventually I think it'll be like we are talking of dream mechanisms. The dream is that the unions are strong enough and the workers will be able to represent themselves.
Yeah, yeah, very important. Thank you. Yes, please.
I wish that instead of we have a three groups, I wish that we have one more group is the group of workers, because here we talk about how to make the grievance channel for the worker. But can we ask the worker what to make them use it? For example, last year we worked in create the QR code for the workers, they can use this, and we introduced this for 10 factories, and only one factory the people use this. 9 factories they don't use this. Many for many reasons they don't have a Wi-Fi. They're not allowed to use a phone in the work floor. They just forget it. They think, oh, we are cheating them. They're not sure that who will answer and how often, so they don't judge it. So if we have a discussion, I think we have a CSO, we have a government, we have a private sector. I wish we also have a group to present for the worker to say, okay, in order to make it work, what I need from the grievance channel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were sort of thinking of CSOs as representing rights holders, and so yeah. But your point is well taken, and I think what you're also saying is oftentimes again that disconnect between the reality of a lived experience versus kind of what's out there and what's limited and what they're able to use. So I think we have time maybe for another round. So if we can start again from the middle, if another group, if this anything else you discussed, again from the point of view of government/policymakers, anything that hasn't been brought up yet that you might have discussed in your group and that someone can share with the larger group.
I think our group representing the government did speak about how it's very important to go to the police as well. There are other mechanisms already there, which showed a lot of ambiguity in terms of understanding of how maybe the internal third party grievance mechanisms are working out currently. Um, and so, like, if I were to speak as government, I would say, yes, there are these mechanisms in place. So there is the police. You can file an FIR if you have XYZ grievances. There are, committees, and as per the law, these committees within these spaces are mandatory, and especially in the context of India, for example. And then there are commissioners appointed by the Ministry of Labor and Employment, and they will go and do inspections. So we do have a wonderful grievance mechanism system in place, and there are also government-run helpline. But I'm glad that there are also third-party independent grievance mechanisms in place, because while government has its mechanism and we want more and more people to use that mechanism, we also want third party mechanisms to operate within the spaces of factories and manufacturing units, where the government cannot always have an eye on how they are faring on a day to day basis. So, if the workers have multiple channels, it's always a good thing, according to me, and it's not a bad thing. And the brands and buyers can also install or the factories can have their own government grievance mechanism as well, apart from the third party. They can learn from the third party as Rakesh was saying, a stopgap mechanism, and then install their own mechanism within the factory spaces. And all these systems can then complement each other instead of, competing with each other, is what we've discussed primarily.
Yeah, I mean, those are very good points. And I think also it depends on, the type. I mean, grievances, there's also like a wide range. There's not every grievance that you would necessarily need to go to, the police, for example. Something that is very local, very at the factory level, something about, the food, the canteen, the other facility. I mean, there's those kinds that also obviously that having a good mechanism at the factory level makes so much sense. So you do need a range to kind of react to the various types of grievances that would come up. Yeah. So thank you for that. How about on this side? Oh yes, please. Yeah, please.
Sorry. So yeah. So of course, yes. I'm like you go to the police when it's a criminal case, and not all grievances are criminal cases. I think one of the main thing we spoke about is to recognize the need for grievances, because usually whether it is governments, whether it's brands, whether it is corporates or CSOs, we think that absence of grievances means it's a healthy system, but actually it's the reverse. That means there's a lot that is being repressed, suppressed, hidden, whichever way you want to take it. So that's the one to encourage and bring them out. So the more you can bring them out, so that's the one. Never mind there's that one wish that bring it up, bring out your complaints. It's never too much. Right now, the way we are, it is too little. Everybody is scared. Everybody is full of distrust. So see how you can work on that. So that's really the main thing.
Yep. And that's the biggest paradox with grievances, right? The more actually you need more to make sure it's working. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen in our brands working with our suppliers on implementing grievance mechanisms is encouraging a mindset shift, which is grievances are not seen as bad things. This is information, very valuable information as to what is happening on the factory floor. And the gentleman earlier about saying that, the QR codes that the workers weren't using, if the workers aren't using what you're providing, the problem isn't the workers, the problem is the tool that you're using. So you have to create both a mindset shift amongst the suppliers to understand that it is not considered a bad thing to see grievances. Actually, and I can tell you from my perspective at the FLA, I'm very suspicious if somebody tells me there are no grievances. This is a key element of understanding the workplace where you're working in.
So how about the private sector? Anyone? Yes, please.
Yeah, I think someone from the team actually very helpfully pointed us out to the question of what makes a GRM successful. And that was when there are no cases. That's not a successful mechanism. So I think we as a group decided that I think trust is one of the things that really makes, and that's something that the panel discussed as well. Someone also said to make it's important for the GRM to be successful that issues are nipped in the bud. So when they are concentrated to a people level, maybe at a smaller site, it's easier to navigate and solve for those challenges before it spreads across geographies and becomes a systemic issue. A one size fits all approach doesn't work, especially even in the Asian context. Local context needs to be brought in. A tier one GRM, like a company, will be very different for that of a farm worker. So, and someone also said that there needs to be, similar to the point that you were making, that there need to be diverse channels. Like there are some more serious issues that needs to be, like, for example, I'm not like trivializing something, but sexual harassment, etc., may be different than that of food quality act. So the levels that are also in place need to be according to the seriousness of the grievance as well, if someone else wants to make a point.
Yeah, and from a private sector point of view, of course, it's in your interest to resolve, to know that what is happening and to resolve them as quickly as possible. So you actually want to know what the grievances are. It's not a good thing, to have them, just suppressed. Yes, please.
Okay. So again, we represented the private sector. Like a typical private sector, we spend most of the time, networking and speaking about what we do and which organization we're from. So the only question that we could get to was the first one, which what makes grievance mechanisms successful. And it's not the outcome of the question that I want to speak about. It's what was the first things that came to my mind. I mean, came to the group's mind. None of the group members here were actually from private sector, so it's all CSO. And it's how they navigated that question. They did not define success. The first things when they really wore the private sector hat, we heard things of like attribution. If I were a brand, how do I know that this particular grievance is attributable to my individual supply chain because one supplier? So that's, we heard things about transparency, we heard things about non-disclosure. So we never got to the answer of, we really tried to be private sector. We never got to the answer of what makes the GRM successful. We really were thinking about what are the risks. We defined it, at least in a very limited way, is how many cases are being resolved as fast as possible. Because once a case comes up, it's public like knowledge, because private sector is known to be more reactive than proactive. So our thing was, let's address all the cases as soon as they come up as fast as possible. One thing that did not come up as part of our discussion, and maybe this is not an ask to the private sector, um, there is a whole question of independency, especially in the channel. If you're having QR codes in the factory you're working in, you're not going to get, I mean, you need to have, independency. You need to have the under the tree model. And all of these things have costs. So ideally, private sector should, I mean, private sector knows that nothing comes for free. So if you want to have a very good at scale GRM model in place, you need to fund it. You need to also move monies to champion that cause and not just say that we want, I mean, the GRMs in place. That was not discussed, but I just wanted to draw upon the nuance of how we never thought about a successful GRM. We just thought, what's the risk to our enterprise? Like I'm trying to wear the true private sector hat. So
Way to role play. I'll say, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, great. I mean, yeah, you bring up very, very, very good points. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is a lot of the thought process of the private sector and exactly what you said. Yeah.
I just have a question regarding, for example, you mentioned that a third party grievance mechanism is a good practice and it should be sustained. Um, have you ever, in your practice, encountered any pushback from the supplier or manufacturing units side where the helpline was housed? In terms of trying to compete with the helpline, trying to start their own internal grievance mechanism and completely sabotage the third party helpline mechanism, or discouraged, like maybe on the face of it, trying to support and ensure the trainings are going well and all of that, but maybe not supporting at all and saying that you call on our channel instead, but then the cases are not being responded to, and then a complete chaos is happening. So is that something you've come across ever, and what have you done in?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I wish we had, so Veronique had to leave, unfortunately, but like, so she really represented the, private sector. So she would have had maybe direct response to your question. I mean, I work with private sector companies, and I've heard actually exactly what you're saying, that they often have that, conflict. So they want the supplier to kind of, put forward this mechanism, and then the supplier has their own for whatever reason. And so, there is that kind of conflict. Sif, I know you're responding to the email, but I don't know, like your role at the FLA, if you're seeing that or you have seen that, the sort of conflict between, from the supplier side, coming back and saying, well, we have something else in place. It doesn't make sense for us to do this. I mean, I've heard from the private sector that is a common thing that happens. Okay, yeah. Yeah, actually,
I think there has been some discussion of saying, oh, we have something in place. But if it's not working, then I think the buyer has a right to ask, what we should be making changes if you're not getting sufficient grievances through the channels that you have in place. And that's.
Yeah, but I think the conflict you describe is quite common from what I understand from working with the private sector. So a quick question, and then I think we have one more, but we have to wrap up. Yeah.
I have a question. I think so. There are a lot of multi-stakeholder initiative for grievance mechanism. It's on voluntary basis. Why don't we think mandatory legally binding grievance mechanism based model like accord in Bangladesh Fire and Building Safety. So I come from Bangladesh. You already informed about Rana Plaza. So after Rana Plaza, accord in fire and building safety uh, run in our country, Bangladesh. So I think so. Their grievance mechanism was in legally binding agreement grievance mechanism. So why don't you think this type of legally binding agreement except from voluntary basis grievance mechanism? Thank you. This is Kausalam working with Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I gave some examples from, enforceable brand agreements, which essentially is also legally binding, and underneath those grievance mechanisms, which can be very effective. I mean, that's a much larger question, and we'll need, long time to say why we don't have more of these legally binding sort of, EBA type of models or the accord, I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why it's difficult to get those in place. But you're right that that is actually, very effective, especially when you're moving from something that's voluntary. Unfortunately, we have one quick question. Yeah.
So my organization is called, run a hotline called Handshake Workers Hotline. We can call ourselves the Asia or sometimes the world largest in-person manual operating hotline system. And I want to address a very, very alarming situation in our sector when it comes down to workers hotline as a grievance mechanism, that many of our projects are being used as an item of greenwashing in the ESG sector. And also, some of the service provider voluntarily want to be the greenwashing item. And some of us involuntarily and unintentionally be the greenwashing item. This is very alarming because so many grievance mechanisms, the hotline, are not useful. No one pick up the call, and some of the phone calls are being called, and the person or maybe the AI on the other end talking about BS, and sometimes they even scold the worker for, why are you calling us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wish we had more time to address this. And you're right that, I mean, that's an example of when you're actually causing more harm rather than helping the situation. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, we're right at time. I wanted to mention, so now you all did the role play. Now actually thinking about, what you actually do in your day job, who you are as an individual, what sector you're representing. This is just a template with something you can take away to think about, what we discussed today. And, based on your, reality, what are some of the things you could do? What are some of the actions you could take based on, a lot of really important things came up, but in your own situation and your own work life, what are some of the actions that you could take to actually improve on the grievance mechanism? And so depending on who, if you're a civil society organization, if you're representing workers, if you're private sector, what are things that you can take? And this is just a template, just a guidance. You're welcome to, use the QR code and you'll be able to download it. There are some guiding questions to help you think about it. And then some, it's just like a template where you can actually write down and just, it's really to get you to think, what are some actions you can take, who you would need to talk to, what are the resources required, and then how could you implement something. And again, remember a lot of things happen incrementally. It's very hard to change things dramatically, but you can actually make incremental changes to make improvements to things that already exist, but maybe, by implementing some changes, you can improve it. So again, I'm sorry to go over time, but thank you very much for attending today and for all your, great comments and feedback and your engagement. Thank you so much.